The White Star Line dreamed big dreams at the dawn of the 20th century. They wanted to dominate the Atlantic passenger trade. Their answer was a new class of giant liners, the Olympic class. Three such sisters were planned to conquer the seas. RMS Titanic and HMHS Britannic were two of these magnificent vessels. They shared a common design heritage, born from the same vision of maritime supremacy. These ships were symbols of their era, built with pride and immense resources. Their names would become known worldwide, though for very different reasons. The story of these sisters is one of ambition, innovation, and ultimately tragedy. These colossal ships were designed for one primary purpose. They were to ferry thousands of passengers across the vast Atlantic Ocean. This was an era of grand ocean liners, floating palaces that connected continents. Competition between shipping lines like Cunard and White Star was fierce. Each company strived to build bigger, faster, and more luxurious vessels. The Olympic-class ships were White Star's champions in this contest. They promised unparalleled comfort for first-class passengers. They also offered reliable passage for emigrants seeking new lives in America. The ships were cities at sea, bustling with life and hope. Although born from the same blueprint, Titanic and Britannic were not identical twins. Subtle and significant differences existed between them from the start. Later, harrowing experiences would lead to even more divergence in their designs. The shadow of fate loomed large over both these great ships. One would meet its end on its maiden voyage, a shocking disaster. The other would be repurposed for war, its life cut short in service. Their individual stories highlight the perils of the sea and the impact of human events. Understanding their differences is key to appreciating their unique places in history. This essay aims to compare these two remarkable sister ships. We will look closely at their designs and the technology they employed. We will explore their intended purposes and their actual historical journeys. The unique events that shaped their legacies will be examined. By comparing their strengths and weaknesses, their triumphs and their tragedies, we can attempt to understand them better. We seek to determine which of these legendary liners, Titanic or Britannic, could be considered the better ship considering all factors. Their stories continue to fascinate us a century later. RMS Titanic was conceived as the ultimate statement in transatlantic travel. The White Star Line intended her to be the pinnacle of comfort, elegance, and opulence. She was not designed to be the fastest ship, but she was certainly meant to be the most luxurious. Her first-class accommodations were legendary before she even sailed. They featured lavish suites, a Parisian cafe, a Turkish bath, and a grand swimming pool. The magnificent grand staircase, with its ornate woodwork and glass dome, was a centerpiece. Titanic was a floating hotel, designed to impress the wealthiest travelers of the Gilded Age. The sheer size and scale of Titanic were breathtaking for the early 1900s. She measured 882 feet and 9 inches in length, with a beam of 92 feet and 6 inches. Her gross registered tonnage was over 46,000 tons. Titanic could carry over 2,400 passengers, along with a crew of around 900. To walk her decks was to experience a new dimension in shipbuilding. Passengers in all classes, from the opulent first class to the more modest third class, were catered for. For many, simply being aboard such a vessel was an adventure in itself. She represented the peak of human ingenuity in maritime construction. Before her maiden voyage, public perception of Titanic was one of awe and admiration. She was widely marketed as practically unsinkable, a testament to modern engineering. This claim, though not officially made by White Star Line in such strong terms, captured the public imagination. The excitement surrounding her launch and her upcoming first journey was immense. Newspapers and magazines published glowing articles about her features. She was more than just a ship. Titanic was a symbol of progress and the technological mastery of man over nature. Few could have imagined the tragedy that lay ahead for this celebrated vessel. The renowned Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Ireland, was responsible for Titanic's construction. Thousands of skilled workers toiled for years to bring her to life. The craftsmanship was evident in every detail, from the mighty engines to the fine interior fittings. Titanic represented hope and economic prosperity for Belfast. She was a proud achievement for her builders and her owners. As she prepared for her first Atlantic crossing, she embodied the confidence and optimism of the Edwardian era. This great ship was expected to have a long and glorious career, setting new standards for ocean travel. Titanic's engine room housed a powerful and innovative propulsion system for its time. She was equipped with two massive four-cylinder triple-expansion reciprocating steam engines. These engines drove the wing propellers. Additionally, a low-pressure Parsons turbine used exhaust steam from the reciprocating engines. This turbine drove the central propeller. This combination offered a balance of power and efficiency. It allowed Titanic to achieve a service speed of around 21 knots. The ship's 29 boilers, fired by 159 furnaces, consumed hundreds of tons of coal each day. This power plant was a marvel of early 20th century engineering. A key safety feature in Titanic's design was her system of watertight compartments. The hull was divided into 16 such compartments. These were separated by transverse bulkheads. The ship was designed to remain afloat if any two of these compartments were breached. In some forward sections, she could even survive the flooding of 4 adjacent compartments. Electrically operated watertight doors could be closed remotely from the bridge. This system was considered state-of-the-art. It contributed significantly to the belief that Titanic was exceptionally safe, almost unsinkable in the eyes of many. Beyond her engines and hull design, Titanic boasted other advanced technological features. She was equipped with a powerful Marconi wireless telegraph system. This allowed communication with other ships and shore stations. Electric lighting was installed throughout the vessel, a luxury not universally available. 4 electric elevators, known as lifts, served various decks primarily for first-class passengers. The ship also had a sophisticated telephone system connecting key areas. These amenities placed Titanic at the forefront of maritime technology. She was in many ways a beacon of modernity and progress. However, despite these impressive advancements, Titanic's design possessed critical limitations. The watertight bulkheads, while innovative, did not extend high enough. They generally only went up to E-deck or D-deck in the forward part of the ship. If too many compartments were breached and the ship tilted significantly, water could spill over the tops of these bulkheads. This is precisely what happened during the disaster. Furthermore, while her number of lifeboats met the outdated British Board of Trade regulations, it was tragically insufficient for all passengers and crew. These design aspects would prove fatal. RMS Titanic embarked on her maiden voyage from Southampton, England, on April 10, 1912. Excitement filled the air as passengers boarded the magnificent new liner. Among them were some of the wealthiest and most prominent figures of the time. The ship made brief stops in Cherbourg, France and Queenstown, now Cove, Ireland, to pick up more passengers. As she left Southampton, a near collision occurred. The suction from Titanic's massive propellers pulled the smaller steamer SS New York from its moorings. Quick action by Titanic's officers narrowly averted disaster, an ominous start to the journey. For the first few days, the voyage across the Atlantic was smooth and largely uneventful. Passengers settled into the routine of life aboard the luxurious vessel. However, as Titanic steamed westward, she received multiple warnings of icebergs from other ships in the North Atlantic. Not all of these warnings reached Captain Edward J. Smith or his officers directly. Some were not given the priority they deserved. On the night of April 14, 1912, the sea was unusually calm, described as like a mill pond. This calmness made spotting icebergs more difficult, as there were no waves breaking at their base. Titanic continued at a speed of around 22 knots. At 11:40 p.m. ship's time on April 14th, lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee spotted an iceberg directly in Titanic's path. They sounded the alarm, and First Officer William Murdoch ordered the ship hard to starboard and the engines reversed. Despite these efforts, the massive liner could not turn quickly enough. The iceberg grazed Titanic's starboard side, buckling hull plates and popping rivets below the waterline. The damage breached 6 of her forward watertight compartments. This was more than the ship was designed to withstand. The unsinkable Titanic began to flood, her fate sealed. The sinking of the Titanic was a slow, agonizing process that lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. As the ship took on water, the crew struggled to manage the evacuation. There was initial disbelief and confusion among passengers. The lifeboats were launched, but many were not filled to capacity. Over 1,500 people lost their lives in the freezing waters of the North Atlantic. The disaster sent shockwaves around the world. Inquiries were held in both the United States and Great Britain. These led to significant changes in maritime safety regulations, including the requirement for sufficient lifeboats for all and the establishment of the International Ice Patrol. Titanic became a legend, a stark lesson in human fallibility. Section 5, HMHS Britannic, A Sister's Shadow and a World at War. HMHS Britannic was the third and final member of the White Star Line's Olympic-class trio. She was laid down at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast after her sisters Olympic and Titanic. Originally, she was intended to be named Gigantic, reflecting her slightly larger dimensions. Her design was meant to build upon the successes of her predecessors. She was planned to be even more luxurious and grander than Titanic. The aim was for her to be the undisputed queen of the Atlantic passenger route. Her keel was laid on November 30th, 1911, just months before Titanic's ill-fated voyage. The tragic sinking of RMS Titanic in April 1912 cast a long shadow over Britannic's construction. Work on the new liner was paused. Engineers and designers rushed to incorporate lessons learned from the disaster. Safety became the paramount concern. Numerous significant design changes were implemented mid-construction. These modifications were intended to make Britannic far safer than her lost sister. The White Star Line and Harland and Wolff were determined to prevent a similar tragedy. The name Gigantic was quietly dropped. Deemed too boastful after Titanic's loss, and Britannic was chosen instead. Even before the post-Titanic safety enhancements, Britannic was planned to be an improvement. Her beam was increased by 2 feet compared to her sisters, enhancing her stability. Her engines were to be slightly more powerful, promising a similar service speed with greater reliability. Plans for her interior included even more opulent public rooms and passenger amenities. She was to feature a magnificent pipe organ in her grand staircase, a feature not present on Titanic. These refinements, combined with her increased size, would have made her a truly spectacular passenger liner. She was poised to be the culmination of the Olympic-class vision. However, the grand plans for Britannic's career as a luxury liner were never realized. Before she could be fully fitted out for passenger service, World War I erupted in August 1914. The British Admiralty requisitioned many large passenger ships for war duties. On November 13, 1915, Britannic was officially requisitioned as a hospital ship. Her luxurious fittings were put into storage or never installed. Instead, she was painted white with large red crosses and a green stripe. Her grand destiny was altered by global conflict. She was prepared for a very different kind of service, one of mercy rather than opulence. Section 6, Britannic's enhanced design safety improved. The most crucial changes made to Britannic's design after the Titanic disaster focused on her hull integrity. Her double hull, which on Titanic only covered the ship's bottom, was extended up the sides. This inner skin ran along the length of the boiler and engine rooms, reaching as high as F-deck. This provided an extra layer of protection against side impacts. Furthermore, 5 of her watertight bulkheads were raised. One was extended all the way to B-deck, the main strength deck. These modifications significantly increased her ability to withstand flooding compared to Titanic. She was a much stronger ship structurally. Britannic was also equipped with a far superior lifeboat system. Instead of the older Valen davits used on Titanic, Britannic featured massive gantry davits. There were 5 pairs of these colossal structures, each capable of holding multiple lifeboats. These davits were designed to launch lifeboats even if the ship developed a significant list. This was a direct response to the difficulties encountered launching Titanic's lifeboats. Britannic carried a total of 48 lifeboats. This was enough capacity for everyone on board, a stark contrast to her ill-fated sister. Safety was clearly the priority in her final design. These extensive modifications meant that Britannic was considered a much safer vessel than Titanic had been. The lessons learned from the 1912 disaster were meticulously applied to her construction. She represented the cutting edge of maritime safety design for her time. If she had entered passenger service, she would have been one of the safest liners afloat. The White Star Line was keen to reassure the public after the Titanic tragedy. Britannic, with her visibly enhanced safety features, was intended to be a symbol of this renewed commitment to passenger security. She was a testament to learning from catastrophic failure. As a hospital ship, His Majesty's hospital ship, HMHS Britannic, underwent further specific modifications. Her grand public rooms were converted into hospital wards. These wards could accommodate over 3,300 wounded soldiers. Operating theatres, X-ray rooms, and extensive medical facilities were installed. Her hull was painted white, adorned with enormous red crosses to signify her non-combatant status under the Hague Convention. Her purpose shifted dramatically from a vessel of luxury to one of humanitarian aid. She was prepared to carry the casualties of war, a noble but somber role for such a magnificent ship. Section 7. Britannic's brief service and tragic end in the Aegean, HMHS. Britannic entered service in December 1915. Her primary role was to transport wounded and sick soldiers from the Mediterranean theatre of war back to Britain. She made several voyages to the Dardanelles, supporting the Gallipoli campaign, and later to Salonika. Captain Charles A. Bartlett, a respected White Star Line Commodore, commanded her. The ship performed her duties efficiently, carrying thousands of casualties. Nurses and medical staff worked tirelessly aboard her, tending to the immense suffering caused by the war. Britannic became a vital part of the Allied medical evacuation chain. Her white hull became a familiar sight in the Aegean Sea. On the morning of November 21, 1916, Britannic was on her sixth voyage. She was steaming through the Kea Channel between the Greek island of Kea and the mainland. At 8:12 a.m., a sudden violent explosion rocked the ship on her starboard side. It is widely believed she struck an underwater mine laid by a German U-boat. The damage was severe, and the ship immediately began to take on water. Captain Bartlett attempted to beach Britannic on Kea, but the effort was ultimately unsuccessful. The rate of flooding was alarmingly rapid, much faster than in Titanic's case. Several factors contributed to Britannic's swift demise. The explosion had damaged one of the main watertight bulkheads. More critically, many of the ship's portholes had been left open by nurses to air out the wards. As the ship listed to starboard, water poured in through these open portholes, bypassing the raised bulkheads. This dramatically accelerated the flooding process. Despite the rapid sinking, the evacuation was relatively well organized. The improved lifeboat davits worked effectively. However, 2 lifeboats launched without authorization were sucked into the still-turning propellers, causing most of the casualties. Britannic sank in just 55 minutes, a remarkably short time for such a large vessel. Of the 1,065 people on board, 30 lost their lives. While tragic, this was a significantly lower death toll than Titanic's. The proximity to land and the assistance of nearby vessels contributed to the rescue of most on board. Britannic's wreck was discovered by Jacques Cousteau in 1975. It lies in relatively shallow water, around 400 feet deep. It is the largest intact passenger liner wreck in the world. Her wartime service, though brief, and her dramatic sinking cemented her place in maritime history, albeit one often overshadowed by her more famous sister. Section 8. Comparing the liner's design, safety, and purpose. When directly comparing the safety features of Titanic and Britannic, the latter was clearly superior. Titanic's original design, while advanced for its day, had critical flaws. These included the height of her watertight bulkheads and the insufficient number of lifeboats. Britannic, benefiting from the hard lessons of Titanic's loss, incorporated significant improvements. Her extended double hull raised bulkheads reaching a higher deck, and the advanced gantry davit system for her ample lifeboats made her inherently safer. These changes were specifically designed to prevent a repeat of the 1912 disaster. In terms of technological advancements, both ships were marvels of their respective construction periods. Titanic showcased innovations like her combined reciprocating and turbine engine system. Britannic, built slightly later, naturally benefited from ongoing engineering progress. Her engines were a more powerful version of the same design, offering 18,000 horsepower compared to Titanic's 16,000 for the reciprocating engines. The most significant technological leap for Britannic, however, lay in her safety systems. The design philosophy had shifted dramatically due to Titanic's sinking, prioritizing survivability above all else for the newer vessel. The intended purpose of these ships heavily influenced their initial design, but their actual service lives diverged greatly. Titanic was built as a luxury liner, designed to offer unparalleled comfort and elegance on the prestigious North Atlantic route. Her career was tragically cut short on her maiden voyage. Britannic was also intended for this same opulent passenger service. However, the outbreak of World War I saw her converted into a hospital ship before she ever carried a paying passenger. Her brief career was one of mercy and wartime duty, a stark contrast to her original grand design. Public perception and historical legacy also differ significantly. Titanic's sinking became one of the most infamous disasters of the 20th century. It is a story of human drama, technological hubris, and profound loss that continues to fascinate and horrify. Her name is synonymous with maritime tragedy. Britannic, while a significant loss, especially during wartime, does not hold the same grip on the public imagination. Her story is less widely known, often relegated to a footnote in her sister's tragic tale. Yet her wartime service and her own dramatic sinking are important parts of naval history. Section 9. Conclusion. Which sister ship truly reigned supreme? Both RMS Titanic and HMHS Britannic were magnificent vessels, representing the pinnacle of shipbuilding in their era. Each ship possessed its own unique story, shaped by ambition, innovation, and the dramatic events of the early 20th century. Titanic's tale is one of opulence tragically cut short, a cultural touchstone for disaster. The emotional weight of her maiden voyage and the immense loss of life ensure her prominent place in history. She remains a symbol of a bygone age and a stark reminder of the power of nature. Her fame, though born of tragedy, is undeniable. From a purely technical, engineering and safety perspective, HMHS Britannic was undoubtedly the superior ship. The modifications made to her design after the Titanic disaster were substantial and effective. The raised watertight bulkheads, the extended double hull, and the greatly improved lifeboat capacity and deployment systems made her a far safer vessel. Had she entered commercial service as planned, she would have offered her passengers a higher degree of security than Titanic ever could. She was the product of lessons learned in the harshest possible way, an evolution in maritime safety. When considering historical significance, Titanic's impact is arguably greater due to the profound changes her loss brought about. Her sinking led directly to the first International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS, in 1914. This resulted in mandatory lifeboat requirements for all passengers, 24-hour radio watches, and the formation of the International Ice Patrol. Britannic's loss, while a tragedy for those involved and a blow to the war effort, did not have the same far-reaching regulatory consequences. It was one among many ship losses in a brutal global conflict. In conclusion, the question of which sister ship reigns supreme depends on the criteria used for judgment. If fame and cultural impact are the measures, then Titanic, through her tragic demise, holds that somber crown. However, if the assessment is based on design integrity, safety features, and overall potential as a passenger liner, then Britannic emerges as the better engineered and more robust vessel. She was built to be safer and more resilient. While Titanic's story captures the imagination with its drama, Britannic represents a crucial step forward in the ongoing quest for safety at sea, a reign of improved design.